What's up, everybody? It's your tour guide around the SWAC C Wells coming at you. And y'all know what time it is. It's time for another edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. So y'all make sure y'all follow those socials. Facebook is SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the notification bell to be alerted to any videos that I upload. And we got a lot of new stuff coming to you consistently, so y'all make sure y'all keep it locked with us. And now on to the show.
Yo, SWAC talk. Light on the mic, it's a play. C Wells the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From Grand Iron to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. C Wells spinning wisdom, gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. Keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. That's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, show we cover the SWAC inside and out. Of course, I am your tour guide around the SWAC C Wells coming at you. And as you can see today, we got a video that we're going to do. We're going to talk about my picks for the breakout players of the 2025 season. A lot of these guys are on my returning leaders list, so that made it a little bit easier. But had to kind of go back and make sure that all these guys were still where we thought they were, because we had that issue when we were doing our 2025 returners list. So as far as I can tell, everybody's here. So we're gonna go ahead and get into this video. And so starting off, we're gonna start off and run through it in alphabetical order like we always do. But before we do that, man, y'all know that we got another video coming at y'all this week. I'm aiming for this week, where I'm going to talk about my picks for impact transfers for each team. So I'm going to go through and pull up the guys I think who are going to make that list and maybe be stars for those teams, or maybe be top contributors, or just even guys that are just intriguing to me. For that team. And also, no SWAC smoke this week. We'll be back next Thursday. Like I said, we're doing every other Thursday. So we had a show last week, so that means next week we'll be here with SWAC smoke, and we'll have something coming at you on Sunday as well. Also, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, especially my old man Charles E. Wells, holding it down out there. Also, want to wish a happy heavenly Father's Day to my grandfathers and my best friend, the Kill Boog Merrill, man. Rest in peace to you all. And just, anybody else, man, out there having a good Father Day, man, don't let them work you today, bro. Make sure they take you out to eat. Make sure they treat you nice, and make sure they get you something nice, man. Because, we do the same for Mother's Day. So y'all make sure y'all do the same for Father's Day. So continue to hold that down. So With that being said, man, like I said, these are the 2025 SWAC Talk um, breakout players, and I want to just kind of explain, what my I have a couple definitions of a breakthrough player. Um, First off, is a guy who maybe did not play much last season or played some, and he's looking to have a bigger role on the team. Maybe somebody in front of him left and he's next in the line, or maybe it's a guy who just because of the system they play on either side of the ball, maybe they're gonna get more touches or more on the field action. So these are guys that either maybe they were freshmen last year and now they're sophomores, or they were new on the team last year and now their role is going to increase. And then I also have guys who are on the cusp of being more than just a guy. Those guys who maybe are on the fringe of being an all conference guy like last season. Maybe they had a good season last season, but this season they're looking to take that next step and become an all conference guy. Um, that's not to say the other guys can't become that, but some guys are right there. They led their team in something, but they didn't get the recognition, or maybe somebody in front of them was even better, and so they didn't get the recognition, but they put up good numbers. And so this season is the season that they break out and become an all conference player. Maybe even possible, a guy becomes a player of the year or anything like that. So those guys on the cusp of becoming, stars in the league or very, very good players and all conference players, those guys made the list as well. And then in some cases, you had teams that didn't have much returning, so you had to just randomly pick a guy. And so, it runs the gambit. But we're going to start off with Alabama A&M, and their pick is a wide receiver named Devin Herring. He's a sophomore this season, so he got some action last year. Played in 10 games. Had a solid outing in terms of action. Finished with 19 receptions for 273 yards, averaged 14.3 yards per catch, along with 25 and averaged 27.3 yards per game in receiving. So they lose their top two receivers, Keenan Hambrick and DeQuadrin Welch. So there is a lot of opportunity for somebody to step in and take the reins. And there's a new coaching staff, so obviously everything's wide open for guys um, to be able to step in and take charge. So I look at these kind of situations with new coaches. Anybody could be a guy that break out because you know nobody is necessarily going to be favored who was favored last season if that's the case, or maybe the system changes and you have a better opportunity for more action. So this is a guy that played in a lot of games. He played in 10 games. That's honestly um, a high number for a lot of their receivers. So he did see a lot of action. He had I think he had a season high 54 yards against Southern this past season. So he led the team in that game. Had a big fourth down catch that led to them making the final drive that came up short. But he's a guy who can kind of fill in somewhere and maybe step into a bigger role. And if he does, then he's a guy I do look at being a breakout guy. He can have a great season where he catches 35, 40 passes if that's the route that they go. So I think he is that guy for them in on this list, and definitely somebody I want to keep an eye out on as this team starts the Sam Shade era. Next up is Alabama State, and you could have put a couple guys on this list. Obviously, either one of your quarterbacks. You got it's tough to say a guy that's going into his, I guess you could say, his final year in Andrew Body is a breakout candidate, but he missed last season with an injury, and so he did not really have that time at Bama State to become what he could have been. So he's a possibility. Also, Kareem Key, a guy who was fifth on the on the depth chart and played the bulk of the season. Um, Obviously, if he gets that spot, then he would definitely be a breakout candidate. So either one of those guys can definitely be that. But my pick went to Jamari Holdsclaw. He played in 7 games, missed some time due to injury. Finished with 74 carries, 472 yards. Had 1 touchdown. He also had 7 receptions for 72 yards. This is a team has a solid offensive line returning, and I think offensively this team will be they'll lean more on their offense this season as they replace a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball. And again, with either of those quarterbacks, taking the reins, that's gonna make things happen. And with a guy that can run the ball, next to quarterbacks that can run the ball, that makes that offense even more deadly. So I expect him to get more carries. Obviously he was on his way before he got hurt. So I expect his numbers to definitely go up, and he could be a guy who becomes an all conference running back. As there are some openings for guys to take those spots. Since we lost a few guys this past season, so he's definitely an electric guy, a guy who can make the big play, and so he's definitely one that I think can step into that and become that guy at that position. And next up is Alcorn, and for them, I picked Gideon Spotsville. He is a defensive end. Played in 11 games, at 32 tackles last season, 3 tackles for loss, and a half a sack. Whenever Alcorn has a good defense, they're strong up front. And they lost Malachi Bailey, so there is an opportunity for guys to have an increase in their numbers. And so this was a guy who in 11 games, he averaged almost 3 tackles a game. Um, had 3 tackles for loss and a half a sack. So his opportunity for numbers to spike is there, and he's been productive in his time on the field. Even though he didn't get a lot of action in terms of stats, playing in 11 games is definitely a good experience. So um, that leave, like I said, that leaves that open. Alcorn did lose some guys on defense, so opportunities are there for guys, and these are the kind of guys I think fit that breakout mode more than others. And that's not to say that these guys are automatically going to be that, because how this goes, man. Somebody transfers in, can step in and take a spot, or somebody else who was waiting their turn could take a step over the summer and take that spot. None of these guys are really guaranteed anything other than maybe guys who have already played a lot. So, it's always, open for, a guy to maybe not be that guy. But, I think, having having some action helps, and having to fill spots on the defensive line is always going to give you opportunities. So if you are available and ready, you should have those opportunities to make some plays. So that's why I have him there. Next up is another guy that had a really good season. Didn't play on a good team, but offensively they started to come around late. His numbers are solid. Um, and he's a senior, so how much can a senior break out? Maybe that one season he can. But that's Malik Huggins from Bethune Cookman. He's a guy who also saw some time at punt returner, had 12 punt returns for 187 yards. Um, and a touchdown, long of 77, average 15.5 yards per return. He also had 12 games of action as a wide receiver, 37 catches, 543 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those are really good numbers for an offense that didn't necessarily do a lot. So you're saying, why is this guy here? This is one of those guys I think can be an all conference guy. Like I said, he's gonna probably have more attention because they lost some guys on their offense. They lost their starting running back. They lost they lost a couple of their tight ends. They lost a couple of receivers. Uh, so the opportunity for more touches is there, and for a team that may not be that good and maybe behind in some games, the opportunity to get those extra passes coming your way is there, and of course being able to do it in the return game as well. So this guy more is in line for all conference type of season, and that's why I think he breaks out there. Um, you just can't beat a guy who can get you touchdowns or yardage in multiple ways. So that definitely is a spot open. I think all conference wide receivers are gone if I'm not mistaken. So there's spots open even for the preseason. So I would expect to see a guy like Malik Huggins' name show up on that list. And well, technically, there is one all conference guy returning at wide receiver, but he's at a different school now. So, that doesn't change the fact that he's an all conference guy. It doesn't even change the fact that he'll be all conference guy this upcoming season. But, that there was um, three out of the four all conference receivers are gone. So there is room for new guys to take that step. And Malik Huggins can definitely be one of those guys provided the offense continues to gel and get better. Next up is FAMU, and I picked Nayron Jenkins again. This is a guy who had a really good season at linebacker. Um, 12 games, 73 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, interception, 3 pass breakups, and a fumble recovery. This is a guy who can be all conference guy, even first team. So that's why he's on this list because I think he can take an even bigger step and become one of those guys that FAMU is known to have. And I think if he takes that kind of step, and the rest of the defense continues to to gel and mold and become that dark cloud defense like they typically were as opposed to last season, this team will be better. Obviously, offensively, there's some questions at quarterback, and they do have talent at running back and receiver and offensive line. So, I think this is a team that can that can kind of improve from last season. But I think a lot of it's going to hinge on the defense and a guy like Nayron Jenkins. If he has a season comparable or even better than last season, he's going to be an all conference guy. He may even come into the season as a preseason all conference guy, and seeing that action is going to definitely increase his numbers and increases his exposure. So that's why he's a guy on this list. Like I said, he already has great numbers. He's already a guy who who showed that he can produce, and that guy is in line to take that next step, and that's exactly what these kind of guys are. Um, Another guy who I think is in that realm, maybe not as high, and um, the opportunity for maybe first team spots are limited because he plays on the defensive line. But that's Bryce Cage from Grambling. Last season, he had a solid season: 12 games of action, 49 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 5 quarterback hurries, and a forced fumble. That's a great season. Obviously, when you had guys, like Traquan Thomas and Kelby Givens in front of you, on the all conference list, the opportunities, weren't there. Even you go down the line, you had James Ash, Keelan Cox, Dorian Wesley, um, Jaden Hardy from Grambling was an all conference guy. Or also, Malachi Bailey, Joshua Nobles, those were great defensive linemen last season. And, you'll be hard pressed to jump over those guys. So with a lot of those guys being gone and 3 out of the 4 all conference first team guys gone, um, that leaves spots. And, this is a guy who can take another step. I think Grambling defense are gonna have to lean on him a little bit more, especially losing Andrew Jones at linebacker, who did everything for that defense. Um, so being able to have more opportunities is obviously going to be vital for a guy who was productive. You're looking at a guy who averaged 4 tackles a game, almost a tackle for loss a game. So he was very very active, and so having that opportunity to maybe take the lead on that defense can definitely put him in that realm and definitely put him on a preseason all conference list. And a great season again could put him on a postseason all conference list. And that's why he is a guy here. Next up is Ashton Taylor from Jackson State. This is a guy I like a lot. I think he had a really strong end of his season. He made some huge plays in the championship game. Um, Jackson State defense is loaded, so how much more his numbers go up, that remains to be seen. But I think this is a guy who can even in the time he had last season, 13 games, 50 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups. 6 quarterback hurries, a forced fumble, and a safety. Um, Numbers like that again can put you in a nice realm. And so, obviously this defense is loaded. They're returning a lot of guys on all three levels. And so, he's definitely going to be a factor on that defense. And he's just a guy that I like a lot. So that's why I put him here. There are so many guys, even though this guy was an all conference first team wide receiver, a guy like Nathan Rember playing on a team like Jackson State can publicly break out. Even Travis Terrell, he had a great season last season, all conference first team return specialist. More touches on offense, he could break out. Jonas Fortillion, that's another guy who a lot of people may not necessarily know. No, he could become a all conference receiver. It's so many guys. I mean, Jeremiah Williams should have been all conference defensive lineman. He should, he can break out and be that, get that recognition he deserved. It's so many guys on his defense and offense that you could pick almost anybody. But I picked Ashton Taylor because I think he fits that mold of a Jackson State linebacker. He's a playmaker. He hitter. He's tough. He's not scary. He's gonna make a lot of plays for you, and he's gonna fit into the system that they run on defense. So that's why he's here. Now this next one is a tough one because I really didn't know who to pick because this team had a lot of turnover. They got a new coach. I don't even know where they are. I don't even know if this guy is gonna actually play this season. I hadn't really heard a lot from Valley in the spring, but I picked Zamarion Kendall. He was a junior. He's a junior running back. Played in 10 games last season. Had 46 carries for 67 yards. Two receptions, 17 yards. Um, he's the guy who saw some action, so that can help on a team that's gonna be, untested. You're losing your quarterback, you're losing, your top running backs, you're losing your receiving threats, you're losing a lot of guys on defense. I mean, you only won one game last year, but you're losing all these guys who actually were solid. And so now with a new coach, everything's wide open. So I don't even know how much this guy will factor into any of this, but having a guy who played last season come back at a spot, I think helps. And so maybe going into camp, he can establish himself and coming out, you know, he can establish himself there. How much his production goes up. I really depends on how this team does and how much he sees action. But this one was a tough one because I did not have any idea who to pick. And that's why I said this was a guy I kind of randomly picked because they just didn't know where to go with them. Next up is Prairie View, and I want to thank my boy Lionel Mosby from PV versus Everybody for this name because he brought it up on the stream we did together on my show, and that's Chase Bingman. He's a running back. Didn't get a lot of action last season, but he had 21 carries for 139 yards, caught 3 catches for 30 yards. With so much new blood on this team, you know, the opportunities for returning guys is there for guys to take a hold and step up with a new coaching staff and also to kind of stave off the challenge of newcomers. So this was a guy who had some big plays whenever he hit the field in his limited action last season. Um, can he continue to develop? I mean, obviously you have Lamar McDowell also there running back, but they brought in a lot of guys. The opportunity for touches is going to be there if you work hard and you do what you need to do. So this is a guy who proved that he can be productive in his limited action. And so, with an increase in action, his numbers should get better. And, he can definitely take a breakout. And again, for a younger guy, when I say a breakout, I don't necessarily mean a guy going from 139 yards to, 1,000 yards. I mean, he may only go up to like 400, 500 yards, but his action and his production will get better. And, he'll be more efficient when he sees his action. And, he may set the stage for a guy the following year, but this is one of those years, this is one of those, one of those situations where you can go from a who that to who that, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of the real key factors of guys on this list. And I think he fits that bill um, provided that he can get on the field with all the new bodies on the hill. Next up, this one was kind of tough, but kind of not, and it's not necessarily set in stone that this guy will start. But I picked Jalen Woods from Southern. Number one, I could have picked one of the returning running backs like Darren Remo, but I don't know how much his action is going to increase. I could have picked a guy like Vince Page to go from you know a very very good linebacker to an all conference guy. I could have picked a guy like Herman Brister to go from a new coming guy to a leader on the defense, and taking another big step and becoming an all conference guy. Could have went with one of the receivers like Darren Morris or even Dupree Fuller at tight end. I could have went anywhere, but I went with Jalen Woods because number one, anybody who knows Southern knows quarterback has been the issue the last few years, and he came into the spring as the front runner. They said he was the front runner coming out of the spring, but with some of the moves they made in the off season, and also bringing in a guy like Jamari Jones, um, you got three quarterbacks who either one of those guys could get that nod. But having a guy who played some here and played in this offense, I think that can help him get a leg up early, especially. Uh, Only played in 6 games last season, was 38 of 66 for 541 yards, had 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Um, he had his young guy ups and downs, but he also made some big plays when he needed to. And so being able to have a spring and off season under your belt as the number one guy, at least coming out of the spring, can help a guy grow. And he, like I said, he showed a lot of flashes when he played, extensive action. He did have some bad plays that young guys make, but this is a guy who can, if he's stable, and he holds off those other challengers, he's stable. He can make this offense take a couple steps forward in the explosiveness and scoring categories. But also, maybe he can help establish, get those running backs, settled, depending on who they bring in, or who takes that job. So it was not as hard to pick, but there's a huge caveat to this one because we really don't even know if he's gonna be the starter. Um, we can feel that way, but we don't really necessarily know it. But that's why he's here. If he is that guy. Next up is Texas Southern, and I have Isaiah Bogarty, um, linebacker, played in 6 games last season, at 32 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 pass breakup. Um, TSU defensively was strong last year. They weren't great numbers wise, but they kept themselves in some games. And so, the opportunity, he to be healthy and play is there, and so if the defense continues to grow and this guy continues to produce, he can take a couple steps forward. He had 32 tackles in 6 games. That's 5 tackles a game. So he was productive in his time. He just didn't have. He missed action. So um, if you just if you just double those numbers because he played in 6 games, he finished with 74 tackles, which would be like Nayron Jenkins numbers. So he was on pace for a solid season. He was on pace for a season that maybe would even put you in the all conference conversation. So if he stays healthy, his numbers could improve, and he could be a guy that could be a postseason all conference guy. Um, just on the strength of what he was doing last season. So I think he's definitely a candidate for this, provided that he's healthy and he continues to be efficient and effective. And finally, this another one was not necessarily tough, but the options were slim because Pine Bluff lost so many guys. Even after I did my returning videos, these guys they lost guys, and um, this is BJ Curry. He's a running back from Pine Bluff. Had a good season last season. A lot of people don't really even know it. He ran for 100. He ran 123 times, had 509 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also had 13 receptions for 199 yards, and I didn't score a touchdown, but 13 catches, 199 yards. So he had over 700 yards all purpose between rushing and receiving. So he had a really good season. The offense was a lot better in the air last season than they've been in years past. Now losing Giovanni Gibson, losing Mekhi Higgins, losing a couple of the other top receivers, um, losing a couple running backs, his production can go up almost by necessity. Um, so this is a guy who could maybe get 800, 900 yards on the ground and give you another 200 yards, through the air if the offense can come together. Obviously, you got so many new pieces now on this offense that there's going to be some growing pains. Um, Defensively, they have to improve. So how much they'll be able to run the ball late in games, may change. They may have to throw it a lot because they're behind. But if they do be able to run the ball, this is a guy who can take that next step and put up some even better numbers. And if he plays better, maybe the rest of the offense comes together. But I do think as long as he's out there, he has opportunity to um, be more productive because they're going to need him, and that definitely makes him a very worthy candidate for our breakout player. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See, well, signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.